The roar of an engine echoed through the quiet streets of Fairview, a town where dreams often rusted away like the old cars in Nick Dawson's garage. But tonight was different. When an elderly man named Frank Monroe rolled up in a 1969 Dodge Charger, battered by time but still carrying whispers of its past, Nick thought it was just another repair job. He was wrong, because hidden beneath the faded leather seats and rusted frame was a story waiting to be unraveled. A letter lost in time, a woman who had vanished without a trace, and a billionaire with a secret that could change everything. What started as fixing an old car would become a journey across decades, where love defied time, fate was rewritten, and some roads were never meant to be forgotten. Before we dive in, if you love stories that mix mystery, romance, and the magic of second chances, make sure to hit that subscribe button. This is one ride you don't want to miss. Now, let's begin. Nick Dawson wiped the grease from his hands and took a deep breath, stepping out of his cluttered auto shop into the crisp evening air. The sun had just begun its descent, casting a warm orange glow over the small town of Fairview. It was the kind of town where time seemed to move slower, where everyone knew everyone. Va noin hungiak mo thuong bibo lai fia sao nhun hung bei. Hat ku train jai radio. Nick had been here all his life. Once, he had dreams of leaving, of doing something bigger. But life had a way of anchoring people in place. His father's passing had left him in charge of the family garage, and over the years, the burden of responsibility had settled deep into his bones. That evening, just as he was about to close up shop, he heard the unmistakable rumble of an old engine rolling into his lot. It was deep, throaty. A sound from another time. When he turned, his breath caught in his throat. A 1969 Dodge Charger, battered and worn, rolled toward him. Its once glorious midnight blue paint now faded and chipped. The headlights flickered, weakly, and its chrome details bore the scars of time. It was a relic from an era of muscle cars and open highways, of speed and freedom. Behind the wheel sat an elderly man. His hands gripped the steering wheel as though it were the last piece of an old life he was unwilling to let go of. His eyes, sharp despite his years, met Nick's as he cut the engine. The man stepped out slowly, his posture stiff but controlled, like someone who was used to being in command. There was something about him, an air of quiet authority, the kind of presence that made Nick instinctively straighten his stance. "You work on classics?" the old man asked, his voice deep, measured. It carried weight, the kind that only comes from experience, or power. Nick wiped his hands on a rag and nodded. "I work on anything with an engine, but this..." He ran a hand along the Charger's hood, feeling the cold metal beneath his fingertips. "This is something special." The man nodded. "Name's Frank Monroe." His tone was casual, but there was something else beneath it. A deliberate vagueness, like he was used to keeping things unsaid. "This car's been sitting in a barn for over 40 years. Thought it was about time someone brought it back to life." Nick felt a flicker of something. Curiosity, maybe even reverence. People didn't hold on to cars like this for no reason. "Why now?" he asked. Frank hesitated, his gaze drifting toward the setting sun. Then, finally, he said, "Because some things shouldn't be forgotten." Nick studied him. There was something more to this car than just nostalgia. He could feel it, but he knew better than to pry. Instead, he popped the hood and took a look. Inside, the engine was a mess, rusted, parts missing, wires frayed. This wasn't going to be an easy fix. "This is going to take time," Nick said, glancing back at Frank. "And money." Frank pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it to him. Nick's eyebrows raised slightly as he took it. The envelope was thick, and the paper felt smooth, high quality, expensive. When he opened it, his breath hitched. More cash than he had ever seen for a single repair job. People didn't throw around this kind of money unless it meant something. Nick glanced back at Frank, suddenly more curious than before. "You must really love this car." Frank held his gaze for a moment. Then, with the ghost of a smile, he said, "Something like that." Nick knew there was more to it, but Frank wasn't offering details. "All right," Nick said, nodding. "I'll start tomorrow." Frank ran a hand over the Charger's roof, his fingers lingering as if saying goodbye. Then he turned to Nick. "One more thing," he said, his expression serious now. "If you find anything inside, leave it be." Nick frowned but nodded. That was an odd request. Frank gave one last look at the Charger, then walked away into the fading light. Later that night, unable to shake the feeling that this wasn't just another job, Nick grabbed a flashlight and decided to take a closer look at the car. Sliding into the driver's seat, he inhaled the scent of aged leather and dust. He ran his fingers along the worn dashboard, picturing the life this car had seen. Who had driven it? Where had it been? He reached for the glove compartment and pulled it open. A faded Polaroid photograph tumbled onto the passenger seat. Nick picked it up. The image, though yellowed with time, was clear. A young woman stood next to the Charger, her hand resting on the hood. She had a playful smile, her dark curls tumbling over her shoulders, and she wore a summer dress that looked straight out of a 1970s catalog. Written in cursive on the back was a name, Evelyn Monroe. 1971. Nick stared at the name. Monroe. The same as Frank. His mind spun. Was she his wife? His sister? Or was there something else? The engine of the Charger suddenly let out a strange tick, a sound too distinct to ignore. Nick glanced at the dashboard. The keys weren't even in the ignition. A chill ran down his spine. Something about this car felt alive. Shaking the feeling, he turned back to the photograph. Who was Evelyn Monroe? And why did Frank seem so afraid of what he might find? Nick placed the photo back, exhaling slowly. Whatever secrets this car held, he had a feeling he was about to find out, and something told him his life would never be the same. The next morning, Nick Dawson arrived at his shop earlier than usual. The 1969 Dodge Charger sat in the center of the garage, bathed in the golden light of dawn. The events of the previous night still lingered in his mind. The photograph, the cryptic warning from Frank Monroe, and that eerie feeling when the engine had ticked on its own. Nick wasn't one to believe in ghosts, but something about this car unsettled him. It felt like it carried more than just rust and old memories, as if it had a story still unfinished. Shaking off the thought, he grabbed his tools and got to work. Nick started with the basics, checking the battery, inspecting the engine. As expected, the Charger was in bad shape. Most of its parts were either corroded or missing entirely. He leaned inside the car, reaching under the dashboard to check the wiring when his fingers brushed against something. A small, folded piece of yellowed paper was wedged deep in the glove compartment. Carefully, he pulled it out. It was another note, this one handwritten in faded ink. "If you find this, it means you were meant to. E.M." Nick frowned, reading the initials again. Evelyn Monroe. Just as he turned the note over, a sudden rush of dizziness hit him. The entire garage blurred and twisted as if reality itself were being pulled apart at the seams. His body felt weightless, like he was falling, yet he never hit the ground. And then, everything changed. Nick found himself standing outside, but it wasn't his garage. He was on a sunlit street, lined with vintage cars and brick storefronts. A warm summer breeze carried the scent of freshly baked bread from a nearby cafe. The sounds were different. No humming air conditioners, no modern traffic noise. Instead, he heard the smooth tunes of the Rolling Stones playing from a nearby radio, the laughter of kids riding their bikes, the distant chatter of townsfolk. Nick's heart pounded. This was not Fairview as he knew it. His gaze fell on the street corner where the Charger sat. pristine, untouched by time. Its midnight blue paint gleamed under the sun, the chrome sparkling like new. And then he saw her. A young woman, maybe in her mid-20s, leaned against the hood of the car, scribbling something into a small notebook. She had dark curls that cascaded over her shoulders, framing a face full of life. She wore a white summer dress that danced slightly in the breeze, and when she looked up, her eyes met his. Nick froze. Evelyn Monroe. She was the exact image from the photograph, alive and breathing before him. Evelyn tilted her head, studying him with mild curiosity. "You look lost," she said, closing her notebook. Nick opened his mouth, but no words came. How could he explain that he had just fallen through time? Seeing his hesitation, Evelyn smiled. "Don't tell me. You just had your heart broken. Didn't you?" she teased. Nick blinked. "What?" She motioned to his expression. "The way you're looking around like the world just knocked you off balance. Either you're lost, or you just realize love doesn't work the way it does in the movies." Nick exhaled, trying to think quickly. I guess you could say I wasn't expecting to be here." Evelyn grinned. "Well, lucky for you, Fairview's a good place to find yourself again." She turned toward the Charger and patted its hood affectionately. "She's a beauty, isn't she?" Nick stepped closer, running a hand along the smooth metal. The car was immaculate, not a single dent or scratch. It was as if time had reversed itself completely. "This is your car?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. "My father bought it for me last year. Best thing he ever did for me. Though he says I drive it too fast." Nick's stomach twisted. If this was 1971, that meant Frank Monroe, the old man who had brought the Charger to his shop, was likely still a young man somewhere in town. Nick inhaled sharply, trying to suppress the overwhelming realization that he had, somehow, stepped into a past that wasn't his. "So," Evelyn said, leaning against the car with a curious smile, "are you new in town, or are you just passing through?" Nick hesitated. He couldn't exactly tell her the truth, that he had traveled here from the future. "Just passing through," he finally said. Evelyn nodded as if she understood something deeper than his words. "You don't belong here, do you?" Nick swallowed hard. "Not exactly." She studied him for a moment before smiling. "Well, if you're just passing through, then you ought to see Fairview the right way." She slid into the driver's seat and patted the passenger side. "Come on, let's go for a ride." Nick hesitated only for a moment before climbing in. The engine roared to life with a power that he hadn't heard in decades. The sound sent a shiver down his spine. As Evelyn shifted gears and pulled onto the road, Nick glanced at her hands gripping the wheel. They were steady, confident, like she belonged behind the wheel of this car. The summer wind rushed through the open windows, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and the faint aroma of a distant barbecue. For a moment, as they drove through the golden countryside, Nick forgot about the impossibility of what had happened. He forgot that he wasn't supposed to be here. He forgot that this moment, this laughter, this stolen piece of time was something fragile. Because in that moment, sitting beside Evelyn Monroe in the summer of 1971, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Alive. As they drove, Nick stole another glance at Evelyn. She was laughing, at something on the radio, carefree and full of light. But deep down, a thought nagged at him. If I'm here, does that mean I can change what happens to her? He didn't know the full story yet, but one thing was certain. Frank Monroe had brought that Charger to his shop for a reason. And now, he had been thrown into this moment for a reason too. What if he wasn't just here to witness the past? What if he was here to change it? The summer air was thick with the scent of fresh-cut grass and gasoline as Evelyn Monroe sped down the open road, her hands gripping the wheel of the 1969 Dodge Charger with the confidence of someone who belonged behind it. Nick Dawson sat in, the passenger seat, still grappling with the impossible reality that had swallowed him whole. He was in 1971. He had somehow stepped into a past that wasn't his, sitting beside a woman who, by all logic, should have been nothing more than a memory. Evelyn let out a laugh as the wind whipped through her hair. "You sure are quiet for someone who just got the ride of his life." Nick forced a smile. "Just taking it all in." And he was. The old-school billboards, the vintage storefronts, the way people on the street waved as they passed, everything was a perfectly preserved snapshot of a world long gone. It was surreal. But something deeper gnawed at him. He knew Evelyn's name. He had seen her face before, in Frank Monroe's Charger in that old photograph from 1971, which meant she was running out of time. Evelyn pulled the Charger into a gravel lot beside a small roadside diner, the kind with neon signs and red vinyl booths. She killed the engine and leaned back in her seat with a satisfied grin. "You hungry?" she asked. Nick hesitated. He hadn't exactly thought about food, but now that she mentioned it, the idea of stepping further into this version of reality felt like another step away from the life he had left behind. Still, he nodded. "Yeah, I could eat." Inside, the diner was alive with the hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the familiar twang of a country song playing from the jukebox. Evelyn slid into a booth by the window, motioning for Nick to sit across from her. A waitress, no older than 20, popped her gum as she pulled out a notepad. "What'll it be, sugar?" Evelyn didn't even look at the menu. "2 cheeseburgers, extra pickles, and a chocolate shake to split." Nick raised an eyebrow. "You order for all your dates?" Evelyn smirked. "Only the ones who look lost." Nick shook his head, but there was something about her, something effortless and magnetic. She had an ease about her, a kind of quiet rebellion that he couldn't ignore. But he wasn't here for casual conversation. He needed answers. "So," he started, trying to sound casual. "Monroe, that's your last name?" Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "That's usually how last names work, yeah." Nick exhaled, debating his next words carefully. "Your family live here in town?" She shrugged. "My dad does. Runs the hardware store. Good man, but old-fashioned. Wants me to settle down, marry some rich guy who'll take care of me." Nick stiffened. This lined up too well with what Frank had told him in the present. Evelyn sighed, stirring the straw in her water glass. "I love him. But he doesn't get it. He thinks a woman's future is written before she even has a chance to pick up the pen." She glanced at Nick then, her expression softer. "I don't want to be somebody's pretty wife sitting in a house that doesn't feel like home." Nick swallowed. She had no idea how much her future had already been written, and suddenly an idea hit him. "What if you left?" he asked. Evelyn blinked. "What? What if you just drove? Took the Charger and got out of here?" For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, a spark of something reckless, something desperate. But then it faded just as quickly. She let out a small laugh. "That's a nice thought, stranger. But running isn't as easy as it sounds." Nick knew she wasn't just talking about leaving town, she was talking about leaving a life that had already been chosen for her. When they finished eating, Evelyn drove Nick back to where she had first picked him up. The sun was setting now, casting a golden glow over Fairview, turning the Charger's midnight blue paint almost purple in the dimming light. Nick stepped out, unsure of what to say. Evelyn leaned against the car, watching him carefully. "You're a mystery, you know?" "That?" Nick smirked. "That's so." She nodded. "Something tells me you didn't just wander into town by accident." He swallowed hard, because she wasn't wrong. Before he could respond, Evelyn reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small, sealed manila envelope. She hesitated, then handed it to him. "What's this?" Nick asked. Evelyn exhaled. "I don't know. My dad left it in the car for me last week." told me not to open it until I was ready. Nick felt a chill creep down his spine. "Why are you giving it to me?" he asked carefully. Evelyn met his gaze. "Because I think you're supposed to see it." Nick hesitated, but then, before he could say anything else, his vision swam again. The world tilted, the light flickered, and just like that, he was gone. Nick gasped as he shot upright, the sound of modern-day Fairview slamming back into his ears. He was back. The Charger sat in front of him in its old rusted state. The diner, the neon lights, the world of 1971, all gone. His hands trembled as he looked down. The envelope was still there, and when he turned it over, his blood ran cold. Because the writing on the front said, "For Nick Dawson," his own name. A message left for him in the past. A message that had somehow made it back to the future. Nick's pulse pounded in his ears. Evelyn knew he was coming. Somehow, someway. She had known, and if she had left him a message across time, it meant he hadn't just been a visitor in her world. It meant he had changed something, and that meant he could change more. Nick gripped the envelope, his breath shaky. Evelyn Monroe's fate wasn't set in stone, not if he had anything to do with it. Nick Dawson sat in the dim light of his garage, the envelope still clutched in his hands. His pulse hammered against his ribs as he turned it over, fingers tracing the edges of the aged paper. For Nick Dawson. How? Evelyn had written this decades ago, before she ever knew he existed. And yet, here it was, real and tangible in his grasp. He inhaled deeply and carefully peeled open the flap. Inside was a single folded letter, the ink slightly smudged but still legible. "Nick, if you're reading this, it means time works in ways we'll never fully understand. It means I was right about you, and it means I have a choice to make. I don't know how or why you ended up in my life, but I know that you weren't just passing through. There are moments that shape us, forks in the road that decide everything. I think I'm standing at one now, and somehow I think you are too. But if I make the wrong choice, I hope you'll find a way to set things right." "Evelyn," Nick exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. She knew something had been set in motion, something bigger than both of them. And she had left him this letter, not knowing if he would ever read it, not knowing if he would ever return. His grip tightened. He couldn't just sit here. If time had given him a door, he had to step through it. There was unfinished business in 1971, and he was going back. Nick grabbed his jacket, shoved the letter into his pocket, and slid into the driver's seat of the Charger. His hands gripped the wheel, heart pounding. He had no idea how this worked, no idea why the Charger was the key. But he knew one thing. This car was a bridge, and if it had taken him once, it would take him again. He took a deep breath, pressed his foot to the gas, and the world blurred. The air around him crackled, the lights in the garage flickered, and in the blink of an eye, he was gone. Nick gasped, gripping the wheel as the Charger screeched onto the road, except it wasn't the road he'd left behind. The sun was shining. The pavement was smooth. The rusted, time-worn dashboard was pristine again. He was back. Nick pulled over, his hands still shaking. The world outside was moving like nothing had changed, like he had never left. And then, he saw her. Evelyn Monroe stood outside a small grocery store, holding a bag of apples, laughing with the store clerk. The sight of her, so real, so alive, hit him harder than he expected. Nick swallowed the lump in his throat. He didn't belong in this time, but for some reason, fate had pushed him here, and he wasn't going to waste it. Evelyn spotted him before he could say anything. A slow, knowing smile spread across her lips. "You came back," she said simply. Nick exhaled. "I guess I did." Evelyn studied him, as if weighing her next words carefully. Then, with